business and the money we make it's a tool, right? It just allows us to experience the things we enjoy with the people that we love. And those moments are priceless. That's worth 100 deals.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Iron Deep podcast. I'm Mike Stansbury. Today, we're talking to Alex Pardo. Alex Pardo, we've been friends for a while, but we're glad to have you on. Thanks for coming on.
My brother, I am blessed to be on with you. It's exciting to see you venture out into the podcast world and Iron Deep. I love what you and Brett are doing. So I'm excited to be on and just be an open book and share, brother.
Yeah, Brett has he's assembled like an Avenger-like team to help with the podcast, and I'm kind of like the guy with the least superpower, but I'm glad to be on the team. So he's got a really good team, and this podcast, Iron Deep, is specifically about guys like you that you've been a business owner, you've been an entrepreneur all your life, and we're trying to attract other entrepreneurs to listen, and because there's a component that is not talked about a lot. With business men specifically, and that's their spiritual journey. And so we want to get into that. But before we do, if people don't know who Alex Pardo is, give me kind of the 60, 90-second overview of kind of where you were, how you started, and where you are now.
Yeah, man, I'll do my best. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share. Born and raised in Miami. My parents came from Cuba. My sister and I were born here in the States. And didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs. In fact, I'm the very first one to go out and start a business. And I thought I wanted to climb the corporate ladder back in 2003 when I graduated from FIU and ended up taking a job at General Electric in their financial management program. And I'm not very good at many things, but I'm good at a few. And one of those is being able to reverse engineer the path that I want to get on. And I remember 3 months into that job, Mike, looking at my boss and all the way up the ladder to the CFO, which is where I aspired to be one day. And I just didn't want to do that. I saw the life that they had and I'm like, why do I want to do this? That's not the life I want. And so I finished my 2-year commitment. I decided to go backpacking around Europe for 3.5 months with a couple buddies. I was single and it was during, I was on a train ride. I think I was going from Spain to Italy, if I remember correctly. And I decided to pick up the book, Think and Grow Rich. And it was that book, along with going through Carlton Sheets' No Money Down, that really opened my eyes and said, you know what, when I get back from this trip, I'm going to start a real estate business. I read somewhere in one of those books that most millionaires are, have some sort of real estate in their portfolio. And I had always been interested in real estate. And so I thought I was going to get back to Miami and start assuming loans because that's what my boy Carlton Sheets taught me. And decided to go to a marketing for deals boot camp. Learned all about wholesaling. That was kind of my path.
That was your path. And then now, so you're in the wholesaling business, 17 years of real estate experience. Alex Pardo now, what does daily operations look like? What does Alex's day look like? What's he handle? What's he take care of? What's his responsibilities? Tell us about that.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of smiling because that question answered 2.5 years ago was very, very different than it is now. It's much simpler. Life is a lot, I don't want to say easier. It's just simpler. 2-3 years ago, I had built out a team. I had 9-10 team members and I had this wholesaling operation with $40,000+ a month in overhead. And I thought I wanted to scale, right? I'm sure your audience members never heard that word scale before, right? Around a gazillion.
It's a buzzword.
It's such a buzzword, dude. And I had joined the Mastermind that you and I are both very familiar with, great community. And I saw people building and scaling and I felt that was my path. And then I quickly realized, similar to my corporate world, that I didn't want to do that. That building that kind of business wasn't aligned with my vision and the kind of lifestyle I wanted. And so back in 2020, I exited out of that wholesaling operation and took a little bit of a sabbatical. And 6 months later, decided to get into self-storage, which I'm sure we may talk about. But to answer your question specifically, operations are pretty simple. I have a personal assistant who's phenomenal and takes so much weight off my shoulders. One thing I've learned, Mike, is to surround yourself with just awesome people where there's a core value alignment and that and are just rock stars, just great people. People talk about the A players, the rock stars. I truly believe that a lot of the success that I have is due primarily to God, I give God all the glory, but then it's really about the people that I've surrounded myself with. And so I have a pretty small team. I have 2 VAs and a personal assistant, and it allows me to operate a couple of profitable businesses and not go crazy working, 40 plus hours a week.
Now it sounds to me, so let me just kind of give a brief update or a brief recap of that. So 3 or 4 years ago, in the middle of it, wanting to scale because we're seeing what other businesses are doing, and we're like, okay, maybe I want that. And then you get to the point where like, oh, that is exactly like that corporate lifestyle that I was running away from, that I didn't want. That, when I went backpacking, Carlton Sheets, that education. I'm sure there was the Napoleon Hill, and now you just had another epiphany, and now you feel like you're in you feel like you're living the life that was the antithesis of that, or where are you at in that journey?
It's a really good question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. I wouldn't say I'm living the life that's the antithesis of that. I would say I have been very intentional, Mike, about creating more space and time to focus on self-care, to plug into God. You mentioned this spiritual journey that I've been on the last, I don't know, maybe 9 months or so. Whereas before, my faith has always been really important to me. It's always been my foundation. But if you were to look at my calendar, my phone, and my bank account, you couldn't really tell that, right? Somewhere I learned and heard that you can tell what people prioritize by looking at what they value, by looking at their bank account and their time. My days are just, I'm very plugged into, I'm allowing myself to be guided by what God wants me to do with my life and with my businesses. I just had a call yesterday with a mutual friend, Mike Wagner, talking to him about making God my business partner and allowing him to guide me to the best decisions versus me making the decisions that I think are best based on selfish reasons or based on reasons that, are just because I want to help people and I want to impact people. And so, yeah, man, I'm at more peace. Now, it doesn't mean I'm not faced with a bunch of challenges. That doesn't mean that at times I don't feel like a firefighter putting out all these fires that I probably started. So it doesn't mean everything's perfect. Far from it. But I'm much more at peace and I feel in alignment with the direction God wants me to go in.
It's funny you use that metaphor, fires that you started. We're all arsonists, aren't 100%. We?
Yep.
But we're not the firefighter. We're like behind. We're like, can we hold the hose? And God's like, no, I got this. Just listen to me. That's so, right. And you mentioned 9 months. Was there in you're on your spiritual journey, and this is really what I want to dig deep into, and kind of tell me how, like, what was it like 9 months ago? Was there a hinge point? Was there a linchpin moment? Or was there something that you read or a mentor that kind of guided you? You mentioned Mike Wagner, and how maybe he's mentoring you, but tell us how you got there 9 months ago, and how do you continue that journey, that spiritual journey that you're on?
And I'm going to be very vulnerable and share with you that I might not have all the answers to your questions because I'm in a phase, I'm in a season now, as they say, where I'm doing my best to just surrender, to surrender, release, let go, let God. These are all words and phrases that just are resonating with me. And so there was a moment or something that happened, but we feel something internally, and I put your finger on it. People have referred to it as a tug. And things started happening, like people that I would meet, I would have that would stir something up inside of me. And I knew I was on this path. I was raised Catholic. And so we don't consistently go to Catholic church every Sunday, and I've gotten away from church. And then I found this community that was very different than it's Christianity, but it wasn't like a structured Catholic mass. And I remember the very first service I attended, I was crying probably 20 minutes into that service. And I'm like, why am I crying? Like, what is it about this message and the music that I'm listening to that has me feeling emotional and is giving me physical chills all over my body? And then that happened the second week and then the third week. And I'm like, God's trying to tell me something here. He's trying to push me in a certain direction, or he wants me to open my eyes. He wants me to maybe create some space. And so I think that was when I started to realize I'm feeling something inside of me. And to this day, I still can't quite put my finger on it. And so when things happen that maybe don't go according to plan, I'm taking it as, hey, I've been saying to myself, he's got the wheel. Maybe I should shift and say he's got the fire hose. And so, yeah, man, I don't know that I can give you a very specific answer to your question about, was there a linchpin moment? Maybe that was it. But I'm being very open on my podcast and even with my family about what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And I'm noticing now my daughters have an even more greater interest in exploring their faith. And so it's just really cool, man. I don't know. I'm guessing a lot of people listening to the show are believers. And if they're not, maybe that'll open their eyes to plug into the source, which you and I both believe is God. And life feels just more at peace, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. I mean, the one thing that God promises is that there's a lot of scripture that talks about letting him take care of your yoke, letting him take care of your burdens. But we, and especially men, because we have all these struggles. We want to be the driver. We're very ego driven, and we want to be the man, and we want to take care of things. And so it's easy to read it and go, yes, I want him to take my yoke. But then it's another thing to give it to him. And the peace comes from I heard you say letting go, or letting God take care of it, because he is the bearer of those burdens. That's kind of what I'm hearing. And you mentioned your daughters. One of the things that as your girls are, what are their ages again?
One is about to be 6 and the other one's about to be 8, like in the coming weeks.
Now, how fun is that?
It's awesome, man. It's being a father is one of the greatest gifts God has given my wife and I. And it's something that I'm intentionally reminding myself on a daily, weekly basis not to take for granted, because I've heard a gazillion times how quickly it goes. And I'm seeing that. I just recently, I stumbled across some iPhone pictures from like when they were 2 and 4 years old. And I'm like, I had to almost jog my memory. Like, I kind of remember that, and that's scary, because those are precious moments you'll never get back. And so I'm doing my best to be as present as possible. And at the same time, I fail pretty often, if I'm being honest.
Yes. When this is all about it, because I'm the same way. I fail consistently. I've got a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. I have a 20-year-old son and an 18-year-old girl, and it just went by like snap of the fingers. And as terrible, or social media is great, good, and it's also terrible. But the best part of my socials is when the memories come back, when they put a memory on there that's 5 years ago, and you're looking at your kid who was 15 at the time, and now they're 20. And you remember that moment. So I get it. That's you'll have more of that at 8 and 6. It's going to come in waves. What's great though is their curiosity. You just said it earlier. They're curious about, hey, you know what's life all about? And those girls are going to look to you and look to your wife Natalie for guidance there. And you know what? That's a gift from God, because what we show them and what we tell them is ultimately what's going to anchor them. So how's that been? Tell us what that's looked like.
Brother, one of the things I've learned, I think that I've really learned this year, is when things don't go to plan with the kiddos, and when I start to feel a level of frustration, they're teaching me something in that moment. And I'm trying to remind myself of that. And it can be a struggle at times. Again, I'm certainly, me, Mike, we've been good friends for years, but for those that don't know me, I'm not the one to ever come on here and pretend like I have all the answers or know it all, because I certainly don't. I'm learning on a daily basis. When these kids are born, they don't come really with a manual outside of maybe the word, right? But I'm learning on a daily basis. And again, one of the things I think I've really latched onto this year is they're teaching me as much, if not more, than maybe I'm teaching them. And you referenced, I think as parents, particularly fathers, it's think it's less about what you say. Words have power, and people give meaning to words, but I think it's more about what you do. These kids are watching, man. Even when we don't think they're watching, they're watching. And so it's cool I notice sometimes them noticing me with my morning routine or reading the Bible, and that piques their curiosity. And sometimes they ask me questions. So I get to play a little bit of a role in shaping them while understanding that the antithesis is true, right? Sometimes when I'm not the best version of myself, or maybe I let frustration get to me, or maybe like they model their parents, right? And so I understand that I have the ability to like shape them, and I also have the ability to quote unquote screw them up in some way, shape, or form. And I know because I've had coaches throughout the years, and I've gone to therapy and different things, and I realize that even something that happens when you're a child, you don't even realize has shaped your view or your mindset or your perspective on something. And we make decisions based on our paradigms and based on our experiences. So I'm just being more mindful, brother, that I tell them, hey, daddy makes mistakes. I don't have all the answers, but I know who does, right? And that's the man upstairs. And so I don't know, man, I'm still figuring out a lot of this process, and just being open to surrendering and just seeing where God takes me.
The process of having kids and raising them is probably the most challenging, because it does reveal, like when you're at home and when something goes awry, it reveals any issues that you need to work on pretty quickly.
Yes.
One of what I've learned so much. I've got 4 kids, and the only benefit of there's a lot of benefits of having 4 kids, but the real benefit is I've got a 20 and 18 and a 13 and a 9. And I know, me and my wife, we always go, oh, we did that wrong, so let's do it right this time. So
Yeah,
that's the cool part. But I do, when I see you and Natalie and the girls on social media, I see you at their events and things like that. You're right, they are watching. One of the things what's interesting is as they grow older, I remember as a kid, and your parents live close by you in Florida. And whenever I went to a baseball game, I would look for my dad. I'd look for my mom, and they went to as many baseball games as they go to. And I remember doing that because there was just, it's, as a kid, it's important that you have that support system. And my daughter is playing for her high school softball team. And what's cool is she comes up to the plate and she looks behind and looks for us before she steps in the box. And I'm thinking, man, that moment right there is just the best, because you can put yourself back there, right? And know that's the best part of life. Yeah, doing deals is great, and being an entrepreneur is awesome. But that is the good stuff.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that I would just comment, Mike, and piggyback on that, if people take nothing else from this podcast, but they don't learn this, because I think everybody knows it to a certain degree, but if they really prioritize, is it's all about, I think, the quality of our lives. And this is, I think, a Tony Robbins, I'm paraphrasing, but it's determined by the quality of our relationships, right? Our relationship with our creator, our relationship with our kids, our spouse, our family, our friends. The older I get, brother, the more I realize that it's less about attaining more and more and more, right? More money, more this, more that. And what I'm after are deeper relationships with the right people.
Right.
And when I hear that story about your daughter looking back before she steps in the box, that's a relationship you have with your daughter. You and your wife, it's relationally driven. And I had that. I was fortunate that as a child, my parents were always plugged into my different sporting events or whatever. I had that support. And so I was able to model that. And you might be listening to this and maybe you didn't have that, but I think that's I think that can reveal to you maybe the kind of parent that you want to be, or the kind of parent that you can continue to strive towards being, right? Because just because you had something in the past, it doesn't need to shape or define the person you are, the parent you are. We can learn from all those things.
We certainly can. And that is the best part of my life. One of the things I've been listening to recently is, we're wired as entrepreneurs and as men and human beings, we're wired to just get more stuff. And what you articulated very well is, hey, I just want to have really good mentorship relationships, good relationships with good friends. I want a great relationship with my wife. I want my kids and I to have a relationship so where that when they're adults, we are best buddies. And what I know about you and what I've been so excited to share with you is that I'm going on vacation with my in-laws this summer. We're going to go on a cruise, but that's something that you consistently do. Alex Pardo, I mean, you're not out there, you're not going, you're not solo on your events and things like that. When you go on vacation, it's a more than just the nuclear family affair. Talk to us about that and what memories that you're making with your kids and with your parents and in-laws. What does that look like? What have those experiences been like?
I think for me, I have such fond memories of going on trips with my family. And again, my family, you know, middle class, they did well, but we certainly weren't wealthy. We also certainly weren't poor. And I remember my parents really sacrificing to take us on trips, even if it was to Disney, 3 hours away or whatever, right? Like, but just to create memories. And I have such fond, I can tangibly remember those moments as a child and how I think it shaped me. And my wife and I wanted to create those moments for our children. And we love travel. And so that's a big part of our vision. And one of the things we try to do is every month, try to take a Friday off so that we can have an extended weekend or what even during the week. And every quarter, take at least a 1 week trip somewhere. And so the year before we plan out, hey, what kind of travel do we want? Where do we want to go? What do we want to experience? We try to get the kids involved. Hey, what do you guys want to do? And so we were just talking before the recording of this podcast, how we just got back from an 8-night cruise and we're going to spend 20 days traveling the Amalfi Coast in Italy. And to me, man, that's what business and the money we make it's a tool, right? It just allows us to experience the things we enjoy with the people that we love. And those moments are priceless, right? Those pictures that we talk about, like that's worth 100 deals, right? Because you those are just moments and experiences that can't be taken away from you. So yeah, man, travel is just a big part of our life. And it's cool that my now 5-year-old has more stamps on her passports than her age, right? I mean, that's pretty crazy. She's gotten to be able to give her a different perspective, for her to see how people live, different cultures, different languages. I think that broadens their horizon.
You know, in 5 years from now, she's going to open that passport up and look at those stamps and have memories of all those places. Yeah. There'll be things that she is just so grateful for those experiences and living life with the family. It's that is something that I experience quite a bit. Is we take a lot of pictures, and I find my older kids going back and looking at things and being nostalgic about trips. We haven't been to Disney in about 4 or 5 years, but it's talked about on like a monthly basis. Hey, you remember that? Remember this?
Yep.
That was so much fun. So yeah, and that's the stuff. Right.
And then the other thing I'll mention is, you know, because you mentioned we always try to involve our parents when possible, because I understand the importance of the relationship that, you know, my parents, their grandparents want to have with their granddaughters and vice versa. And so we're all maybe it's the Latin culture. I don't know. I can only speak from my perspective, but we've always been a very tight family unit. And that's just very, very important to us.
You and I are about in the same stage of life. Our parents are getting older. And so one of the things that I think that we just have to be mindful of is that, you know, time is it's fixed, whether we believe it or not. I mean, we've got just enough time here on this earth to spend with family. And so if you can just take advantage of it as much as you can, you need to do that. So last night I was again reminded, I've heard this a million times, but it hits you different sometimes because I've got my daughter's going off to college. You know, she's at the age of 18, she spent about 80% of the time of her life with you at that moment.
Mm.
So 80% of all that time that you spend of your one-on-one time with her is already done at 18. So
Yeah, man.
that's an average. And so I hope to not be average. Don't want to be mediocre, but it is just a sober reminder of the amount of time that we have left. So I have it on she has 120 days, and I think it's at 119 days until she leaves for college, and she's going to UT Chattanooga. But I'm trying to be mindful of that, to do something every day, and to make sure that has an impact. Because again, we got limited time.
There's this gentleman that I had the opportunity to interview on my podcast about a year and a half ago, Jim Shields, I believe is his name. And I think he authored a book called 18 Summers. And it talks about that as parents, we have, when you put things in that perspective and you say, we have 18 summers with our children, let's say your kids are 9, like, dude, you got 9 more summers before they're probably off to, be adults and have their life. And not like you can't experience more summers with your kids, but things are certainly different. They're going to probably have their own family at some point, or they get older, life happens. And so when you start to put things, we feel like we have all this time. And sometimes I find, Mike, that it takes a tragedy, right? A passing of somebody we know or somebody we don't know, like a celebrity. I remember when Kobe Bryant passed away years ago, it really hit me. I'm like, man, like, this is somebody who I felt I knew because I'm a Lakers fan, a big Kobe fan, and I never met the dude, so I don't really know him, but like, for life to just be taken away in an instant at 41, 42 years old, however he was, it's very sobering to know that we have no idea when we're going to be called, and to try to just take advantage of every opportunity.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And, when those things happen, it's always good to really do an introspective. I have another buddy of mine who's a big Lakers fan, and his name is Nick. And when Kobe died, that was on a Sunday, I talked with him on Wednesday. I didn't realize how big of a fan he was. He knew everything about him, and he was a wreck for a week. But one of the things we talked about is just what you just alluded to too, is like, I can't. He's got 2 boys. He goes, I can't waste any more time. And that actually helped him change. It made him pivot on a lot of stuff, that event. So it's apropos that you mentioned that. Well, Alex, I think we're coming up to the mark here, about the end of the Iron Deep podcast. If people want to know a little bit more about you, how would they find you? Tell us a little bit about that. What's that look like, Alex?
Thank you, man. So I've been hosting. I've been just very grateful and fortunate to have been hosting a podcast we're coming up on 7 years, almost 700 episodes, which is just kind of blows my mind. It's crazy. When I started it, it was really the intention then, and the intention today is just to give back and help people. But I never could I have imagined that I'd be doing this 700 episodes later. So it's called the Flip Empire Show. And don't let the title of the podcast mislead you. It's not about flipping. It's much, much deeper than that. A lot of the conversation we had on this podcast, if you enjoyed that, I think you would enjoy plugging into that. We also talk business and lifestyle and things of that nature. And then a mutual friend of ours, Steve Kavanaugh, and I, at a mastermind that we the 3 of us were a part of at that time, we started a community of entrepreneurs called Ascend, which is a mastermind community. We still do that to this day. So ascendyoursuccess.com would be another place to get in contact with me.
Awesome. Yeah, I have sent a few entrepreneurs to Ascend. Alex and Steve do a great job, and they impact lives. And Alex, again, thanks for coming on the Iron Deep podcast. This podcast is for businessmen who are entrepreneurs, and I appreciate you being vulnerable here and talking about your spiritual journey. Because what that's going to do is it's going to give men permission to get to think a little deeper about it and maybe ask some questions. And if you have any, if you're listening to this podcast and have questions about, God, about Jesus, about any of that, and maybe you just want to have a conversation about what Iron Deep's all about, please reach out to us and let us know. And we'd love to connect with you. Again, thanks for being on the Iron Deep podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching on all the different podcast forums. We'll see you next time.